The early evening air carried a crisp chill, a reminder of autumn's approach as Ethan Walters pulled into his driveway. The military base was a distant memory now, replaced by the quiet suburban neighborhood he once called home. His uniform, meticulously pressed as always, felt oddly out of place in the familiar but now unfamiliar surroundings. It was a uniform that had seen countless sunrises and hardships overseas, a symbol of duty and sacrifice. But tonight, it offered no solace. Ethan climbed out of his car, the creak of the door cutting through the silence. His boots crunched against the gravel path as he approached the house he had dreamt of during sleepless nights in the desert. The porch light was off, a detail that unsettled him. Emma always left it on, a beacon of warmth guiding him home. He opened the door, expecting the usual cascade of familial noise, the patter of little feet, Emma humming a tune from the kitchen, the muffled drone of cartoons. Instead, he was greeted by an oppressive silence. It clung to the air, heavy and unwelcoming. "Claire," he called, stepping inside. His voice echoed back at him, amplifying his unease. "Emma?" No answer. Ethan dropped his duffel bag in the hallway and walked into the living room. The faint smell of lavender lingered, a testament to Emma's obsession with scented candles. But the couch was empty, and the television screen black. Moving through the house, he noticed subtle changes, a new vase on the mantel, framed photos rearranged, a stack of unopened mail on the kitchen counter. "Daddy?" The voice startled him. Ethan turned to see his 6-year-old daughter, Claire, standing at the top of the stairs. Her hair was messy, her eyes red-rimmed. She clutched a worn teddy bear, a gift Ethan had sent her from overseas. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, forcing a smile. "Where's your mom?" Claire hesitated, biting her lip. Tears welled in her eyes, and she descended the stairs slowly, each step deliberate. By the time she reached him, she was trembling. "Mommy's on a date," she whispered, her voice cracking. "With her boyfriend." The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. His breath caught, the room spinning for a moment as he struggled to process what he'd just heard. "A date?" he repeated, his voice barely audible. Claire nodded, fresh tears streaming down her cheeks. She said he's going to be my new dad." The teddy bear slipped from her grasp, landing with a soft thud on the hardwood floor. Ethan stood frozen, his mind a whirlwind of emotions, anger, confusion, betrayal. He dropped to one knee, gathering Claire in his arms as she began to sob. "It's okay," he murmured, his voice shaky. "I'm here now." But even as he held her, a cold dread settled in his chest. The life he thought he was returning to had been irrevocably shattered, and the pieces lay scattered before him like shards of broken glass. Ethan's arms wrapped tightly around Claire, her sobs racking her small body, but his mind was spiraling into chaos. Her words echoed relentlessly in his ears, "Mommy's on a date with her boyfriend. He's going to be my new dad." He closed his eyes, willing it all to disappear, to rewind to the moment he stepped through the front door, to the life he thought was still intact. But no matter how much he wished it away, the truth loomed heavy in the air. He guided Claire to the couch, brushing the tears from her cheeks with his thumbs. "Stay here for a minute, baby," he said softly. She nodded, clutching her bear, her tiny body trembling. Ethan planted a kiss on her forehead and forced himself to stand, though his knees felt like jelly. The first wave of panic hit him like a tidal surge as he paced the living room, hands on his head. His breathing grew ragged, his thoughts racing so fast he could hardly grasp them. How could this happen? What had he missed? What had Emma done? Questions clawed at his mind, offering no answers. Unable to contain himself, he stormed into their bedroom. The faint lavender scent followed him, a cruel reminder of Emma's once soothing presence. Now, it felt like mockery. His gaze swept the room, landing on the dresser where her jewelry box sat atop. He reached for it and yanked it open. Bracelets and necklaces spilled out, tangling together in a mess. It wasn't enough. "Why?" he muttered under his breath, his voice rising. "Why would you do this to me?" His hands moved on their own. Drawers were ripped open, clothes yanked out and hurled across the room. Silk blouses and worn t-shirts fluttered to the floor, forming a chaotic heap. His own reflection in the bedroom mirror stopped him briefly, disheveled hair, wild eyes, his chest heaving like he'd run a marathon. He barely recognized the man staring back. The photo on the nightstand caught his eye next. It was their wedding picture, Emma in her simple white gown, him in his crisp uniform. They'd looked so happy, so certain of their future together. Without thinking, he grabbed the frame and threw it against the wall. The glass shattered, shards raining down like tiny daggers. The sound echoed through the house, piercing and final. "Daddy?" Claire's frightened voice floated down the hall. Ethan froze, the weight of what he'd done crashing down on him. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to steady himself. "Get it together, Ethan. Claire needs you." "I'm okay, sweetheart," he called, forcing a calmness he didn't feel. "I'll be right there." He sat heavily on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. Anger still bubbled inside him, but guilt began to seep in, choking the air from his lungs. He glanced at the phone on the nightstand, its black screen taunting him. Finally, he reached for it, his hand trembling. He pulled up Emma's number. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Each tone was a knife twisting in his chest. He half hoped she wouldn't answer, but on the 4th ring, her voice came through, bright and chipper. "Hey, Ethan," she said, as if nothing were wrong. "Did you make it home okay?" He felt a wave of nausea. "Did you make it home okay?" It was a simple question, but it carried the weight of years of betrayal. His grip tightened on the phone. "Emma," he said, his voice low and tight. "Where are you?" There was a pause. He could hear the faint hum of chatter in the background, the clink of glasses. "I'm out with a friend," she said lightly. "Why?" "Claire told me," Ethan said, the words trembling on his lips. "She told me about your boyfriend." The silence that followed was deafening. The hum of chatter and clinking glasses on her end cut off abruptly. "Ethan," she said finally, her voice tinged with guilt but also defiance. "I think we need to talk." "It's..." "Don't," he snapped, cutting her off. "Don't pretend this is something we can just talk about. 3 years, Emma. 3 years. I was out there risking my life, fighting for our family, and you," his voice cracked. "You've been lying to me. Lying to Claire. What the hell is wrong with you?" "Ethan, please," she said, but her tone lacked the desperation he wanted to hear. "It's not as simple as you think. Not as simple." His voice rose again. "You brought another man into my daughter's life. She thinks he's going to be her new dad. Do you have any idea what that did to her? What it's doing to me?" "Ethan, lower your voice," Emma said sharply. "You're scaring Claire. Don't you dare tell me how to talk to my own daughter," he growled. "You don't get to play the concerned parent after what you've done." Emma sighed audibly. "I can't have this conversation right now. I'll come home, and we'll..." "Don't bother," Ethan said coldly. "Don't you dare step foot in this house tonight." "Ethan," she started, but he hung up before she could finish. The room spun around him as he lowered the phone. For a moment, he just sat there, staring blankly at the mess he'd made, the scattered clothes, the broken glass, the photo frame lying face down on the floor. His breath came in shallow gasps, his heart pounding like a drumbeat of despair. From the hallway, Claire's voice broke the silence. "Daddy? Are you okay?" Ethan swallowed hard, pulling himself together for her sake. He stood and went to the doorway, forcing a smile as he crouched to her level. "I'm okay, honey," he said softly. I'm just trying to figure some things out." Her eyes searched his face, wide and worried. "Is mommy coming home?" "Not tonight," Ethan said, stroking her hair gently. "But I'm here, Claire. I'm not going anywhere." He scooped her into his arms, holding her close as she rested her head on his shoulder. As he carried her back to the living room, his mind raced. He had no plan, no roadmap for what came next. But one thing was certain, the life he'd left behind for duty was gone, and the one waiting for him was a battlefield he had never prepared for. Ethan spent the next hour pacing the living room, his thoughts a chaotic storm. Claire had fallen asleep on the couch, her tiny face streaked with the tears of a child caught in the crossfire of adult betrayal. Ethan couldn't stop looking at her, couldn't stop thinking about the weight of her words. "Mommy's on a date with her boyfriend. He's going to be my new dad." The image was seared into his mind, like a scar that refused to heal. But it wasn't just the betrayal that tore at him, it was the unanswered questions. Why? Why would Emma throw away their life together? Why now? Why at all? They'd exchanged letters, video calls, and promises during his deployments, painting a picture of stability, love, and commitment. Was it all a lie? The thought made his stomach churn. Ethan grabbed his phone again. He stared at Emma's number on the screen. His thumb hovered over it, wavering between calling and smashing the phone against the wall. Finally, he took a deep breath and pressed dial. This time, she answered on the first ring. "Ethan, I told you I can't talk about this right now," she said, her tone clipped and defensive. "Too bad," he replied, his voice cold and sharp. "You're going to talk. Right now. Because if you don't, I swear, Emma, I'll walk out that door with Claire, and you'll never see us again." She hesitated. He heard the faint rustle of movement on her end, as if she were retreating to a quieter place. "I don't want to do this over the phone," she said, softer now, almost pleading. "You don't get to make that call," Ethan snapped. "Not after what you've done." Another pause. Then, a sigh. "Fine," she said. "What do you want to know?" Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. "Why, Emma? Why did you do it?" "I was gone, yes, I know that. But I was gone for us. For you and Claire. I trusted you to keep this family together while I was gone. Was that too much to ask?" Her response was hesitant, as if she was piecing together her defense. "It wasn't about you being gone, Ethan. Not at first. It was about how we were when you were here." "What are you talking about?" he demanded. "We were fine. I thought we were fine." "That's the problem," Emma said, her voice shaking now. "You thought we were fine. But we weren't. Ethan, do you have any idea what it's like being married to someone who's never really here? Even when you were home, you weren't present. Your mind was always on the next mission, the next deployment. And I get it, I really do. But after years of being an afterthought, of being alone even when I wasn't, I couldn't anymore." Ethan's jaw clenched so tightly it ached. "So your solution was to find someone else? To start playing house with another man while I was risking my life for this family? That's your excuse?" "It wasn't supposed to be like this," Emma said, her voice cracking. "I didn't plan for it to happen." "Don't give me that," Ethan said harshly. "You don't accidentally end up in another man's arms. You don't accidentally introduce him to our daughter." At that, Emma's tone shifted, defensive and sharp. "Don't you dare use Claire against me. She's happy. She's had stability with me, something I couldn't give her when you were gone, when I was falling apart and pretending everything was fine." Ethan felt his blood boil. Pretending? His voice was low and venomous. "All those calls, all those letters. That was just an act, wasn't it? To keep me in the dark while you were building a life with him." "It wasn't like that," Emma said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Who is he?" Ethan demanded. "I want his name." "Ethan. Tell me his name," he roared, his control slipping. There was a long, tense silence. Then, quietly, "Mark." Ethan's heart sank. The name struck him like a blow. Mark was someone he'd trusted, a family friend, the guy who mowed their lawn when he was deployed, who came over for barbecues. Mark had even been there the day Ethan left for his last tour, clapping him on the back and telling him to stay safe out there. "That bastard," Ethan whispered, fury surging through him. "Mark. It was Mark. All this time, I thought he was looking out for you, for us. And it turns out he was just waiting for me to leave so he could take my place." "It's not like that," Emma said weakly. "He didn't plan it either. It just happened." Ethan let out a bitter laugh. "It just happened. You make it sound like a car accident, Emma. Like some random, unavoidable event. You chose this. Both of you." "I know," she admitted, barely audible. "And I know I hurt you. But it's not as black and white as you think. I didn't set out to betray you, Ethan. I didn't want to hurt you." "Funny," Ethan said, his voice ice cold. "Because you've done nothing but hurt me. And Claire." At the mention of their daughter, Emma's composure faltered. "I love Claire," she said, her voice desperate. "Everything I've done for her." "Don't," Ethan warned. "Don't you dare drag her into this mess you created." Emma was silent, and Ethan took a shaky breath. He wanted to scream, to lash out, to break something. But a calmer, darker resolve began to take root inside him. "You've made your choice, Emma," he said finally. "But don't think for a second this is over. Mark doesn't get to walk into my house, take my family, and get away with it. And you, you'll answer for this too. Ethan, please don't do anything stupid. Don't tell me what to do, he interrupted, his voice steely. You lost that right. He ended the call and sat there in the suffocating silence. His hands shook as he set the phone down. He looked over at Claire, still sleeping soundly, her small frame rising and falling with each breath. This wasn't just about Emma anymore. It was about his daughter, about the life she deserved. And Ethan wasn't about to let anyone, not Emma and certainly not Mark, take that away from her. A new battle had begun, and Ethan was ready to fight. The soft hum of the car engine outside alerted Ethan that Emma was home. He stood in the living room, the shattered remnants of their wedding photo still lying on the floor. His fists clenched at his sides as he heard the sound of her heels clicking up the porch steps, followed by the jangle of her keys in the lock. The door creaked open, and Emma stepped inside, her face instantly wary when she saw him standing there. Ethan, she began, her voice soft but edged with caution. I said I'd come home to talk. Talk. Ethan's voice was dangerously low, a storm barely contained. Oh, we're past talking, Emma. Emma shut the door behind her and set her purse down carefully, like a soldier approaching a landmine. Please, can we not do this in front of Claire? She's asleep, Ethan snapped. Thanks to the meltdown she had after telling me her mom's got a boyfriend who's replacing her dad. Emma flinched at his words. I never meant for her to find out like that. But she did. Ethan barked. She knows. She's confused, scared, crying, because of you. Because of me? Emma's voice rose, anger creeping in now. Ethan, this isn't all on me. Do you even understand what it's like to raise a child alone, to hold everything together while you're halfway across the world? Don't you dare play the victim, Ethan growled, stepping closer. You didn't hold anything together, Emma. You tore it apart. You made a choice, and now our daughter is paying for it. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but her jaw set stubbornly. I did what I thought was best for me, for Claire. You don't get to judge me for that. Best for Claire. Ethan's laugh was cold and bitter. You think introducing some stranger into her life, telling her he's her new dad, is best for her? Do you have any idea what kind of damage you've done? Emma threw up her hands, exasperated. He's not a stranger, Ethan. Mark has been there for her, for me. More than you ever were. Ethan's anger boiled over, his voice erupting like a thunderclap. I was there for you. I put my life on the line for this family. For our future. And while I was out there fighting to keep us safe, you were playing house with Mark. Claire's soft cry broke through the tension like glass shattering. Ethan whipped around to see her standing in the hallway, her teddy bear clutched tightly in her arms. Daddy, she whimpered, her eyes wide with fear. Why are you yelling? Ethan's heart clenched. He knelt down and opened his arms. Come here, baby. Claire ran to him, burying her face in his chest. Ethan stroked her hair, his voice gentle now. It's okay, Claire. Daddy's not mad at you. He looked up at Emma, who was frozen in place, guilt etched across her face. I can't let her stay in this house tonight, Ethan said, his tone cold but resolute. What do you mean? Emma asked, her voice trembling. I'm taking her somewhere safe, he said, standing with Claire in his arms. Somewhere she can be with people who actually care about her. Ethan, you're not making any sense, Emma protested. Where are you taking her? He didn't answer. Instead, he turned on his heel and headed for the front door. Ethan. Stop. Emma's voice was panicked now. You can't just take her. She's my daughter too. Ethan turned, his glare like steel. You lost the right to decide what's best for her when you let Mark into her life. With that, he walked out the door, Claire clinging to his shoulder. Emma followed him onto the porch, her voice frantic. Ethan, don't do this. You can't take her without telling me where you're going. But Ethan ignored her. He opened the car door and buckled Claire into the back seat, her teddy bear tucked safely beside her. Daddy, where are we going? She asked, her voice small. To Grandma and Grandpa's, Ethan said, his voice softening for her. They'll help us figure things out. He shut the door and climbed into the driver's seat. As the engine roared to life, Emma ran to the car, banging on the window. Ethan. Don't you dare drive away. Don't you? But her words were drowned out by the screech of tires as Ethan pulled out of the driveway. Emma stood frozen, watching the taillights disappear down the street, her chest heaving with panic. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. What would they say? Would they take his side? Would they even believe him? When he pulled into the driveway, the porch light came on, and the front door opened. His mother stepped out, her robe clutched tightly around her, concern etched on her face. Ethan. What's going on? Why are you here so late? He got out of the car and gently unbuckled Claire, carrying her up the steps. Mom, I need your help, he said, his voice heavy. It's Emma. His father appeared in the doorway, his expression hardening when he saw Ethan's face. Come inside, he said gruffly. We'll sort this out. Ethan carried Claire into the warm, familiar living room, setting her down on the couch. She yawned, her exhaustion evident, and his mother immediately began fussing over her, fetching a blanket and tucking her in. Now, his father said, crossing his arms. Start talking. Ethan told them everything, the betrayal, the lies, the man he once called a friend. His father listened in silence, his jaw tightening with each word. His mother's eyes filled with tears as she glanced at Claire, who was already drifting to sleep. You did the right thing bringing her here, his mother said softly. She needs stability right now. She needs to feel safe. His father nodded grimly. But you can't just take her without telling Emma where she is, son. That's not how this works. I don't care, Ethan said, his voice fierce. Emma doesn't get to decide what's best for Claire anymore. His father opened his mouth to reply, but a knock at the door interrupted them. 3 sharp raps, followed by the unmistakable voice of a police officer. This is the police. Open the door. Ethan's heart sank. She called the cops. The knock at the door came again, louder this time, echoing through the quiet of the house. Ethan's father exchanged a worried glance with his wife before moving to answer. Ethan stood rooted in place, his mind racing. He tightened his arms protectively around Claire, who stirred in her blanket, murmuring softly in her sleep. When the door opened, 2 officers stood on the porch, their faces neutral but firm. The taller of the 2 stepped forward, his gaze flickering between Ethan's father and the room beyond. Good evening, the officer said. We received a call from a Mrs. Emma Walters. She's reported that her husband has taken their daughter without her knowledge or consent. Is Ethan Walters here? Ethan stepped forward, holding his ground though his heart thundered in his chest. I'm Ethan Walters. And this is my daughter, Claire. The officer's eyes softened slightly as they landed on Claire, who had woken now and was clinging to her father's neck. Sir, your wife has expressed concerns for the well-being of your daughter. We need to ensure she's safe and discuss the situation. She's perfectly safe, Ethan said, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions within. I brought her here because I couldn't leave her in a home where her mother's betrayal has shattered everything we built. I'm protecting her. The second officer spoke this time, her tone calm but insistent. Mr. Walters, we understand you're upset, but removing a child without notifying her mother is a serious matter. We'd like you to come with us so we can resolve this peacefully. Ethan's father stepped forward then, his voice gruff. Now wait just a minute. My son is a good man. A soldier who spent years fighting for this country. If he says he's protecting his daughter, then that's what he's doing. The taller officer held up a placating hand. We're not accusing Mr. Walters of any wrongdoing. But custody disputes are a delicate matter. Let's not escalate this further. Ethan looked down at Claire, her frightened eyes searching his. He couldn't bear the thought of her being taken from him, not tonight, not like this. But as he met her gaze, he knew he had to be strong, to show her that even in chaos, there could be order. All right, Ethan said, his voice heavy. I'll come with you. But Claire stays here with my parents. The officers exchanged a glance, then nodded. That's acceptable, the woman said. Let's step outside to talk. Ethan bent down and placed Claire on the couch, brushing her hair from her face. Stay here with Grandma and Grandpa, okay, he said softly. I'll be back soon. Daddy, she whimpered, her small hands clutching at his shirt. Don't go. He kissed her forehead, forcing a smile. I'll be right back, sweetheart. I promise. His mother stepped in, wrapping Claire in her arms as Ethan walked to the door. The cold night air bit at his skin as he stepped outside, the officers flanking him. Emma's car was parked across the street, her figure illuminated by the headlights. She was pacing, her phone pressed to her ear. When she saw Ethan, she marched toward him, her face a mix of anger and desperation. "Where is she?" Emma demanded, her voice shaking. "Where's Claire?" "She's safe," Ethan said, his tone icy. "Safer than she's been in a long time." "Ethan, you can't just take her," she cried. "She's my daughter too." "She's our daughter," he corrected, stepping closer. "But unlike you, I'm not the one who tore this family apart." Emma faltered, guilt flickering across her face, but her resolve hardened quickly. "You don't get to decide what's best for her, Ethan. You've been gone for years. I've been the one raising her, the one keeping her life stable." "Stable?" Ethan laughed bitterly. "You think bringing Mark into her life, lying to her, telling her he's going to be her new dad, that's stable?" The officers stepped between them, the taller one raising a hand. "Let's keep this civil," he said firmly. Emma's eyes filled with tears, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean for it to happen this way, Ethan. I never wanted to hurt you. But we can't fix this by tearing Claire apart." Ethan took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. "You already tore her apart, Emma. I'm just trying to pick up the pieces." Before Emma could respond, the female officer stepped forward. "Mrs. Walters, your daughter is currently safe with her grandparents. For tonight, we recommend that both parties take some time to cool off. Tomorrow, we can discuss custody arrangements in a neutral setting." Emma's face crumpled, but she nodded reluctantly. Ethan's heart ached as he watched her, a woman he'd once loved deeply, now a stranger standing before him. The next morning, Ethan woke early, his mind heavy with the weight of what was to come. Claire was still asleep, curled up between her grandparents in their bed, safe and warm. Ethan stood at the kitchen window, staring out at the rising sun, wondering what the day would bring. His father joined him, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. "What's your plan, son?" he asked. "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "I just know I can't let her go back to that house, not until I know she'll be safe." His father nodded. "You've got a fight ahead of you. But you're not alone." Later that morning, Emma arrived at the house, escorted by her lawyer. Ethan's stomach churned as he met her on the front porch. The conversation was tense, filled with accusations and half-hearted apologies. But in the end, they agreed to mediation, to putting Claire's needs above their anger. As Emma drove away, Ethan stood in the doorway, his heart heavy but resolute. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain: he would fight for his daughter, for her happiness, for her safety. And no matter how broken things seemed now, he vowed to rebuild, to create a life where Claire could thrive, even if it meant starting over alone. The road ahead was long, but Ethan was ready. This time, the battle wasn't for a country or a cause. It was for his family. And he wouldn't lose.